I hear a lot of myths around jobs to be done being new. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's the new thing." It's actually quite old, and it has a rich history, over a couple decades old. But last time we talked about jobs to be done not being a single method, and I think that goes hand in hand with that is it's actually still evolving. So jobs to be done is not new; it's actually decades old, but it's still evolving. And every time we do events like this, or we have guests on here, I love just hearing how everybody's kind of reinterpreted jobs to be done or made it their own, and kind of extended the practice and integrate it with other practices as well too. So yeah, we might be fairly young as a field, jobs to be done. It's not new though, but it's still evolving as well too. My name's Jim Callback. I am the co-founder of the Jobs to be Done Toolkit and the author of the Jobs to be Done Playbook.
And I'm Elaine Matthias. I'm Jim's co-founder of the Jobs to be Done Toolkit. We are so glad to see everyone here today. Vito, thank you so much for joining us. We have just a couple of quick announcements and updates that I want to share with everyone. The first is if you are interested in learning more about Jobs to be Done Essentials from Jim and myself, we have the Toolkit Essentials course, which does a really great job kind of presenting everything that you need to know about Jobs to be Done 101, along with a lot of tools and resource guides to help you facilitate jobs to be done in your own workplace. We also want to announce the next Untangled. It is the last Tuesday of every month. So that will be October 25th at 12 p.m. noon Eastern time. So we'll be back here with another special guest to keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
All right, Jim.
Excellent. And thanks everybody for showing up. So remember to ask your questions in Zoom. We like this to be very conversational. I'm going to introduce our guest in a second and we'll have time to talk. But we really want this to be an open discussion in the community here. And we also like if you turn your webcam on and ask the question directly, it makes for a more engaging session. All right. I see some folks still coming in here, Elaine. That's great. So we're already over 20. All right. Vito Locante. We used to work together. Thanks for joining us here.
Thanks, Jim.
And of course, Vito has a case study in the book. So Vito and I worked together at Citrix. I think I've talked about some of the jobs to be done work that we did there. I was a part of the UX team and Vito was a researcher there. And we did a couple of full-blown, fairly extensive, Vito, I think, jobs to be done project. And I know I learned a lot from working with you guys there.
Yeah, we did a number of things. We were printing out diagrams that were like the entire length of the wall, and yeah, we did some new stuff there. It was exciting.
Yeah, and some surveys and things like that. But before we dig into some of the stories, and I want to talk about your stories over at Trulia, why don't you just tell folks a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Vito Locante. I am a UX researcher by training. I live in Berkeley, California right now, but I'm calling in from Chicago, visiting some family here in Illinois. Yeah, I've been in UX research and kind of the research field for about 15 years. Have worked with Jim at Citrix. I've been at kind of big companies like Citrix and Oracle, but also small consulting firms and startups. And I just celebrated my 7-year anniversary at Zillow Group. So I'm a dinosaur there.
Yeah. And it was your work that you were doing with Trulia, which is also, so Zillow is an online real estate provider and information provider, and they bought Trulia. Is that what it was?
Yeah. So they have kind of a multi-brand strategy, yeah. And I joined about 6 months after they acquired the Trulia brand. Which is another just internet listing site for homes for sale and also for rent. And yeah, so I led research on the Trulia brand for a couple of years. And since then I've shifted over to lead a group of researchers on the on the Zillow Group rental side. So helping landlords, with tools they need to help people, to fill their units and get people into their units, and then for renters to search for places to live.
That's great. And I want to hear a little bit about the work at Trulia and then what you're doing now in your current role. But I always ask folks how they first heard about jobs to be done and how they got into jobs to be done.
Oh, yeah. I believe that was through you, Jim. That was working together at Citrix, where you introduced a whole bunch of new models and frameworks. We were a relatively new team there, and yeah, I know, Jim, you came in and you ran some kind of internal workshops and turned us on to Indy Young's mental model framework, right. Jobs to be done, a few other things, and from there we were making, that started our kick on making maps to make sense of things at
right.
Citrix.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we had a really good research team with Catherine and everybody there too. Of course, I talk about the work that I did with Catherine on GoToWebinar, but we did for GoToMeeting and I think GoToTraining. We did the mental model diagrams. We also did the full jobs to be done survey on the outcome statements, right? We had all the minimize and maximize statements, and we did all of those surveys as well too. So we were pretty knee deep in it, if I recall.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
And I took whatever I knew there and kind of tried to implement a lot of it at Trulia when I moved over to Trulia.
Well, that's probably a good point to stop here. And I know you have a couple slides, and we'll just take 10 minutes or whatever to go through some of the work you did at Trulia, and then I think you have something else you wanted to share with us as well too.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit of what we're doing now. So
I should be able to share now.
All right, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'll share my whole desktop and put it into
okay. Yeah, that looks good. We can see it here. Jobs to be done in Exos. Yep.
All right. Yep. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about jobs to be done that we did at for the Trulia brand, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what we use now, which we call experience outcomes, which some of you may be familiar with if you've worked at or followed some of the work out of Microsoft. So I'll start with the Trulia work, and this was really, gosh, I started there in 2015, and we were at this point where I was the sole user researcher there, and we were trying to just really understand our users, what brings them there, what keeps them there, what brings them back. At the time, I think we were struggling with a really crowded marketplace and not a lot of differentiation between a lot of the brands. And so that was one of the things we were constantly trying to figure out, like where's our space in this crowded internet listing services space. So what we did as a user researcher, I went and surveyed people. I went and looked at, a lot of our current listening posts, like NPS. We were collecting NPS at the time. And, we knew that from that data, from looking at NPS, from doing some of these surveys, we knew that we were known for having neighborhood details. So at the time, Trulia had crime and safety statistics. We had commute times. We had a partnership with Yelp that actually showed local amenities on the map around the home. And when we surveyed people, we realized that that's something that actually stuck out when we asked, of your favorite brands, the brands that you visit, what are some of those things that they do well? And, we really showed that we stuck out in this, and we wanted to kind of double down on that. So we got everyone on board with this idea that hey, this is a potential place to differentiate, but we need to go do more. What we're doing now is great. It got us seen in this space, but what else can we go do, and what should we go focus on? And the team was really eager to just go ideate. And Jim, this is kind of that the real talk. So they just wanted to get in a room and get a bunch of people and say, what are some of the solutions around neighborhood information that we can provide? And so we held these 100-person brainstorms and came up with a ton of ideas. We narrowed and consolidated those ideas down to a bunch of solutions, ideas, and took this kind of pseudo market research approach of the Kano method. And so we asked, hey, how would you like this product if this feature was included, if this feature wasn't included? You can do some math and kind of figure out what features are standouts, what are attractive, what are must-haves, nice-to-haves. And what we ended up finding out is a lot of these ideas are really attractive ideas. But when 3/4 of the ideas that we have are attractive, it didn't really give us a place to start. And so I've seen this before. And so the suggestion I made to the team was, let's go back to what problems these solutions are actually solving for customers. And let's go get an idea of what's the biggest problem to solve. And so this is where there's a huge overlap between user research and jobs to be done, right? It's about the perspective. And my perspective is always, let's start with the user, understand them, understand their needs, understand their workflow, understand where they need help, and let's go develop solutions to help them. And so the approach that we took was basically, let's just go translate these solutions into the needs that we know from our research. And then we basically did, Jim, I think this was essentially Anthony Ulwick's version of like the opportunity index. Is that where that came from?
Totally.
So basically we said, okay, well, let's go understand like those root jobs that they're trying to get done or those desired outcomes. And so like, this is a good one that we landed on here, is like, get a sense of what the neighborhood looks like before actually going there. That ended up being not just a very important thing, but something that wasn't well met today. And I think that's the difference between us just getting some feedback on a bunch of solutions and us going and really understanding like what's important and what isn't well met in the market today. And so that's how we developed our opportunity index around a lot of these kind of jobs to be done or desired outcomes around things that people wanted to do outside of the home. I could pause there for a minute if you had, Jim, if you had any questions or wanted to clarify anything.
Well, I have a comment right off the bat, and you've actually helped me solve a problem that I have, which is we get the question all the time in our courses, Elaine, how do I scope my job? Where do I start? Right? Because there's levels of our altitude. There's, you're in an industry, and there's lots of jobs that you might address, particularly for software and things like that. And you just helped me answer it, because why did you focus on the neighborhood jobs to be done is because you had already identified that as a potential differentiator, and you had a gap in knowledge around it as well too. Mm-hmm. So your scope was really narrow. You weren't looking at, the whole buying a home or, real estate. You weren't looking at that level. You were looking at, how do we help people get a sense of the neighborhood before they buy, right? So it scoped down, but it matched to a strategic imperative that you had. And you didn't have to think about you didn't have to think about how people move their homes. You just, how do we get them the neighborhood information? So your job was scoped. So thanks for doing that, because you helped me out.
Yeah, it was fortunate.
You get that question all the time.
Yeah. And it just, this was, the company just not being very, the brand just not being like very mature at the time. We didn't have a set process for how do we spin up a brand new feature or functionality. And they just defaulted right to, let's go get this cross-functional group together.
Get 100 people in the room. Yeah.
Just start thinking of solutions.
Right.
And so, and then, we did that whole thing, and I already had the jobs to be done. I had the pitch ready for like what we should do instead, while we were getting, input. So
you just quietly let that fail, and they're like, hey guys, why don't we go over here, right?
Yeah. And
that almost always fails.
It helped to have both too, because then we could say like, hey, of this, how do these features rank? Now that we know that this is the job that we want to focus on, and this is the outcome. And then you
work the job out from there. Yeah, that's great. But there's this type of Darwinism that a lot of companies assume is true, that ideas will survive on their merit alone. That if we just get more ideas, the best ideas will float to the top. Of course, that doesn't happen. You just have more ideas that you don't know what to do with, right? So I love the fact that you then combine that with some metrics, right? Because jobs to be done can be qualitative, but also quantitative. And then you bring those metrics in, and it provides a lot of focus to the team. And I'm assuming that's the impact that it had there, is that you had a lot of focus moving forward, correct?
Yeah. And that's, exactly like you said, if we did it the right way, you're narrowing down, right? You're saying, hey, let's not focus on these aspects. We're going to focus here. We're going to get really crisp on this is the space to play in, and now let's go create solutions. But we did it a little bit backwards, but it ended up, we were able to kind of,
but that's how things happen. I know a lot of times when Elaine and I teach, we have our little process, and people worry about, disrupting the process. And it's like, it's not going to play out that way anyway, because real life is a lot messier than a textbook, right? So being able to roll with the punches. And that's why I say Jobs to be Done is also evolving, and just even your approach to it was, it was off the book, right? You were off script a little bit there. But you rolled with it,
And I reread my conclusion in the case study was the big conclusion I came to is like, you don't need everyone on board with Jobs to be Done to be able to do Jobs to be done.
Interesting.
There are ways to get it in there, and even disguise it as this is how we do user research, right? Disguise it as user-centered design, or not even disguise it, but use those familiar terms, because they're all, they're taking the same approach. It's the same perspective.
Right. Agree. And that's why I teach Jobs to be Done as a way of thinking, because you can white label the thinking and call it something else, and I'm fine with that, and I've done that as well too. Call it something else, but whatever you need to get it through, so that thinking and the prioritization, and more importantly, the focus that you can then bring to the table. Thank you for your service, brainstorming all of these ideas. Let's focus on these 3 or 5, right? And you're able to say that with a lot more confidence as a researcher.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I know you have more here too. I got more questions, but you know what? The chat's already zooming with questions here. So let's get onto some more content, and then we can take other questions.
All right. Yeah, I'll show just kind of the result of this work, and then I'll move on to experience outcomes. So, this gave us a place to focus, and this was the result. So I think it was probably about a year, maybe a year and a half later, we launched what we called neighborhood details pages. And so this was to the neighborhood level, insights about what it's like to live in an area. And so this is one screenshot I grabbed. This is live on the Trulia site today. So this is the Glen Park neighborhood. We have all of the stats and details on the top. We have interactive maps. And then the big thing that this research pointed us to is this: how do I understand what it's like to live there from the people who actually live there? Well, we figured out mechanisms to go generate user-generated content and display them on the site. And so this is real feedback from people who actually live in that neighborhood, telling others who are shopping from wherever what it's like to live there. So there's a few different mechanisms of like ratings, of like, how much do you agree or disagree that this neighborhood has this feature, but then there are also kind of open-ended, basically reviews of the neighborhood. So this was kind of the end result, was us creating this whole user-generated content, entirely new pages that give people new insights on what it's like to live in a place.
Good to see that result. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that was exciting to see. So next I want to talk a little bit about experience outcomes. So this is, while I was doing that at Trulia, there was a whole group at Zillow before we combined teams, and a few of them had come from Microsoft, and experience outcomes are a really big way of working and thinking at Microsoft. And so they brought a version of that over to Zillow. And, I would guess like the experience outcomes are akin to, experience outcomes are more like the desired outcomes. I think we might break a few rules here by using the word help or, some of those types of things, but it's basically a way for us to continue to focus on the outcome. And so we've operationalized these exos just as a way to remain focused on jobs to be done, remain focused on the desired outcomes. We use these across Zillow Group. So all of our different, whether we're talking about agents or renters or landlords or property managers, we have a set of experience outcomes for all of our users, and we organize them into a map. So our journey maps are organized around these different desired outcomes or experience outcomes. And then the way we use them, we use these experience outcomes in every product and design and research brief. And we're able to use them to also develop product requirements and success criteria and things like that. And so I can show you and within each of these, we have a ton of detail.
And these are blanked out because you can't show all of them. Is that
Sorry.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I ran this by our comms team, and they wanted me to.
You're just giving us a sample
A little
platter
mystery.
here.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I left some of the more obvious ones out there, like help movers find homes based on stated criteria, right? So if we were talking about it in Zillow terms, we'd be talking about filters and we'd be talking about search results.
Right.
But if we abstract that, we're talking about, hey, they have criteria. We need to help them find homes on that based on that criteria.
Right.
So just a glimpse into some of the jobs that we talk about, or some of the outcomes. And then within each of those, like we actually, once we created these, we wanted to dig deep into all of them and like really create meaning. And so we do this thing called hydrating the exos. So giving them a lot of content. And so we actually had this big push last year to hydrate, 80 exos. That was a big push from our team. It's like, hey, let's make these be more self-serve for everyone. Mm-hmm. And so they contain a lot of information. So a description of, what the exo is, kind of how it shows up in the customer's process. And I think the most important part is what success looks like. And we've actually operationalized how we do these interviews too. So we do, we talk to them about the topic, and then we kind of switch to talk about something similar. So we're talking about like finding a home online. We might switch to be like, well, how do you find groceries online, or how do you shop for a car online? How is it similar or different? And to really like get them to think about what success looks like, how they measure their own success. Nice. We have a few different ways to kind of get at that. And then we take the success criteria, and that's the stuff that feeds into the product requirements, the design principles, and even some user-centered metrics that we want to track when we go put out a feature that addresses this problem.
So the exos are those help me statements on the previous slide, or is that assess is experience outcome? Is that assess the condition of the property?
Yeah, I took out the help me for this one. So this is like a property manager. So there's a property manager when they're turning over their rental unit. Right. They basically they walk through with their sheet of like, what do I charge this person for? What do I have to fix before the next person moves in? And that's part of their process, is assessing the condition of the property, one for repairs, and then also like for upgrades. And
do you begin all your exos with help me? Because I saw on the previous slide, they all started with help me.
They're either help me or let me, I think is pretty much all of them, but I tend to drop some of that stuff, like this one. I just, assess the condition of the property. Yeah.
Which would be, for our terms, that would be a great functional job that we can then map, and I could use this in a workshop. Okay, what's the beginning, middle, and end of assessing the condition of a property? And we could actually dig into that. So I just wanted to clarify here too, these hydrating, by that you mean adding more context. It's basically a story. You're basically fleshing that out and saying everything around it, what the before, during, and after, the emotions, everything that's happening at this point in time, right? Everything that you know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we did an original set of lots and lots of interviews just to understand, just to identify all the different jobs. Right. And then we kind of, over the course of several months, got in there and actually ran, 15, 20-minute interviews on each one of these with a handful of people.
Just add water and shake.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And then this would be the thing that you could post somewhere, and it could be self-serve, that anybody looking for information on this could, without having to talk to you or go through a workshop, they could glean some information that's helpful to them.
Yeah, we're doing, annual operating planning for next year. And there's, for all of our initiatives, there's a whole section about customer impact and customer problems. Right. And, I'm assigning people on my team to go in there and double check everything. Right. And we're seeing the references. We're seeing the language already being used because they're using the self-serve tool.
That's how you know you win, Vito. That's how you know you win, is when they reference back to this stuff, then you win as a user researcher. That's what I've always said.
Yes.
Even if they don't give you credit, you win.
Yeah. I love hearing my words said back to me. That's great. And I never correct anyone to say who said that.
Nope.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to get the credit though. But if you hear your words in a slide, or if somebody's saying your words, you win.
Yeah. Well, it's part of that whole, is it Tomer Sharon? It's our research, not my research. Right, yeah, whole mentality, right?
Well, I mean, but this point in time right here where you are is really important, because you can do all the math and science of jobs to be done, or another technique, right? But you have to bring that into the organization. in a way that is going to be adopted and consumed, so that it's not, oh, they do that over there and I do this thing over there, and maybe I'll look at their thing over there. That it needs to be consumed in a way that people can actually gain insight from it, but also empathy too, right? Because I'm assuming there's a lot of empathy in here too, right?
Yeah, that's part of the narrative. So I cropped a lot of this out, but there's a whole narrative that describes the situation, the scenarios,
right?
And then we get into what success looks like as a second section.
Right. Excellent. Did you have any more to show, or?
This is the last slide I had prepared.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, we actually had about 3 months ago, we had some guests, Elaine, Martin and Manuela, and what they did, they made these high fidelity videos. So they would actually take what you had here and script it into a video that was like a documentary of these people going through their lives, and then the jobs to be done that they prioritized would emerge from that, or were in the videos that they made. So their storytelling process went like one step further than what you did and made it a high fidelity, empathetic video.
That's great.
Yeah. A lot of effort to get there though. But it sounds like you guys are like writing a lot, because I mean, you're a user researcher, but you're writing a novel here. I mean, there's a lot of writing involved, right?
There is, yeah. And we do, there are a few other things that we do, like we try and do experience assessments and things like that, where we tend to do a little bit more writing, more like reports that are kind of leave behind, self-serve types of things versus our regular presentations.
I mean, when you show it to me like this, I say this is jobs to be done. Assess the condition of a property, right? The outcomes that you had as well too, at least in the thinking, right? You could call it XOs and I'm fine with that. In fact, please do it, because the field is evolving, and part of the evolving is the language that we use, but also the techniques that we use. And if you're going to use this and call it XOs, but do something different with it, it only extends the practice in my opinion. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
All right. I know we got some questions, and I know Mike had a question, because Mike asked me the question. I'm going to start with Mike's question from last week. Mike Morgan.
Yeah, Mike has 2 questions now in the queue.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had a question about the job map, right? And the Trulia one.
Yeah. I'm just going back to my, so it looked like in the case study, and also what you're showing us today, that you're applying jobs to be done methods without actually doing a job map. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, we did not start with a job map.
Right.
And so with that, then there's the implication that you already understood the steps in the jobs, or is that not even relevant?
With the neighborhood one, for instance.
Yeah.
I think that it could have been helpful, but yeah, I think we still don't really understand the sequence of events with neighborhoods. That is a really tricky thing that just continues to come up and evolve, and people think about it at a lot of different levels. And that was part of what made it difficult, is people revisit a lot of that criteria and adjust and look at it at kind of different altitudes. So it's like, hey, I know that I want to live in this town, and I don't care where now, but then once you get into more of that searching, now you're refining it, and now you're like, okay, now where's the bus stop? Where is this and that? Where is the nearest grocery store walkable or not? And so there's those different levels. And so we probably could have benefited from organizing those jobs a little bit better, but we did not start there, and we never really got to a point where we organized it like that.
And just to add on, because it's relevant, when you did your survey, you didn't survey the outcomes, right? You surveyed the job itself, right? Which is super interesting, because I know just from reading OLIC, and also the training, the course that I took with Jim, was it last week?
Yeah.
It was, you were saying you survey the job steps or the desired outcomes. It's interesting to actually just survey the job itself.
Yeah.
So
and that was
the steps, right?
Yeah. And that was out of necessity. That's because we didn't do that research to deeply understand it. We started at solutions, and we were backing our way into the desired outcomes, but we hadn't done that. We knew the jobs. We had a good sense of the jobs. but we never dug into that detail to be like, now what does success mean? What are you trying to actually accomplish by doing that job, and really abstract that? So it's kind of out of necessity that we did it at the job level.
No, I totally understand. Thanks, Vito.
Yeah. So Elaine and I teach a course called Job Maps from Beginning to End. And we say the first best thing that you can do in jobs to be done is create a job map. And then here comes along Vito, and he doesn't do a job map. So you're just throwing us off balance here a little bit.
Yes. And you do even have a template mural for it, right?
Yeah, I do. I still think it's the first best place to start, by the way. But proof in the pudding, you don't actually need to do it. And our friend Sean Townsend as well too. I've worked with her over at Coinbase. She was at Intercom. She works with job stories. She actually, that's her unit of analysis, is to create job stories and go right for the, when I'm in this situation, what's the outcome and the emotions and everything, and then prioritize those and work those into brainstorming sessions or whatever the next step is. Also possible.
I just introduced that concept to one of the researchers who reports to me, and she just framed a whole workshop around job stories. Well, I would argue that your hydrated XOs could probably benefit from a structure that kind of goes through those things as well too. What's the step? What are the circumstances? What's the capability that they're looking for? What are the outcomes? What are the emotions that they have? And it almost be a content format for these things as well too, but then extended, across a couple, what is this, couple pages each? Yeah, not much more than what's here. So it has some of those elements, but we don't capture the emotional, and that's a big critique of these experience outcomes, is they are very functional.
Well, why don't you put the emotional stuff in there? Because you talked to a dozen people, so you know what they were saying, right? Yeah. You could put it in there.
We could. I mean, if we, and I think maybe the format is dictating that. It's like, here's what we need to capture.
It's definitely put emotion as a label of what you need to capture and make it a slot in here too.
Yep.
I would definitely.
Well, we do. That is really important, because that's a big difference we see between landlords and property managers, right? A landlord and investor who owns a unit, is much more interested in finding the person that they think will take care of their home, versus a property manager who has 100 units to fill and is looking at credit score, income, how they look on paper.
That good.
And different success criteria for them too, right?
All right. That's your homework, Vito. Next time I talk to you, I want to see the emotions in here.
All right. I'm writing it down.
Okay, good. So where do we go now, Elaine? Sorry. This is way too easy talking to you, Vito, here. I think we could just chat the whole time. I haven't seen Vito in a couple of years now. I can't remember the last time I saw you, actually.
We did a conference together after the pandemic.
The Rosenfeld
April
thing.
of 2020. But I haven't seen you in person in 5 years, probably.
That wasn't in person, though. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been to San Francisco in probably that long myself.
Yep.
Okay. Jim, maybe take back over the screen sharing.
Oh, am I not doing that? Okay, you're right.
No, I'm going to take over. Which is fine.
Let me do that. There we go.
And then you'll see, so that this is the sort of the queue of questions. And then for people that were responding to the questions in the chat, I posted their comments in the orange. So
cool. So I'm going to go over to Ron's question then.
Yeah. Ron, are you still here? Ron actually had two. So
okay.
I am still here. Yeah.
We'll allow it. We'll allow two, Ron.
We'll have 3 or 4 too. we'll let it sit.
I was just curious. I perpetually struggled with Ulwick's approach when you get to the survey, just when you think of 150 plus desired outcomes. And I think that's feasible if you're a market research team with a large budget, but a lot of us aren't. So Vito, I was just curious, and it was a little bit answered in the previous question, just how you think about structuring that survey so it's feasible to conduct on a reasonable budget.
Yeah, even maybe this will be helpful. So even the survey that we did, we showed a subset of those jobs to, I think there were like 18 jobs, and I think we showed a random 6 jobs to each person. And so that was a way that we were able to to get to not have a lot of fatigue, because there were other things that we also asked in the survey, and so we didn't want to show them 18 different concepts and ask them, or 18 different jobs, right, and ask them at least 2 questions on each of those. Right. And so one of the things that we did was, gave them a random sample of 6, but that did require a pretty big sample size. And we had access to, to lots of customers. We had right, site intercept surveys and stuff like that, where we could just, intercept the people who are coming onto the site, or we could launch it a different way.
Right. And then 6 questions is like 3 minutes to complete, right? So you could do it with a fairly low. Did you even have an incentive then?
I can't remember this one. I don't think we did.
Yeah, it was just volunteer, and then 6 questions. We need 3.5 minutes of your time. But if you do 1,000 of those and it's randomized, then your total samples would cover all 18 statements that you had.
Yep.
Jonathan also wants to know how many responses were in the survey.
Ooh, that is a good question. It's been a while. I think this was 2016. I think it was at least 1,000 people.
Right.
Because we were, I think the one that I'm thinking of was at least 1,000 people. That was kind of the benchmark for people to take a survey seriously.
Right. Truly.
Yeah. Were you distributing it just to people in your research network, or?
I can't remember this one. We did a lot of surveys at the time. So we had some surveys that were coming up as site intercept surveys. And so as people were shopping through the site, they did a few actions, and we would ask them some questions to do on the site. I think this one was a little bit too lengthy for that. So I think what we did was we sent it to a list of customers who we knew were active shoppers. And so we looked at some behaviors of theirs, pulled a list, and then sent it out from our marketing team. We have like a marketing team that sends out, invitations to participate in research and do surveys and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you.
And you have a very high traffic websites. I mean, Trulia and Zillow have like a gazillion eyeballs a day. Like
millions.
Right. Yeah. Right. Millions of guests a day. Right.
Yep.
All right. Should I go? Oh, this is Ron's second. Was that satisfactory, Ron? Did we answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think that in that case, it's a little easier at the job level. I think when you start getting down to measuring desired outcomes,
50 outcome statements. Yeah, right.
Bazillion outcome statements. Right. Take our super huge survey.
And that topic has come up like every other Jobs to Be Done Untangled session. Somebody asked that question: how do you get through 150? How do you even get through 100 or 50 of them is a good question as well too. And we've talked about some ways around that. The randomizing one, I've always theorized about that, Vito, but I've actually never heard about the randomizing. The other one is to limit it by like pre-prioritize it by finding a spot in your job map that is the hotline, and just only ask a subset of those. There's a whole bunch of things that people have tried, but there's all these contortions around getting away from having to have 150 items, Ron, right?
Yep, absolutely. No, that makes sense. Yeah, my second question was just, Vito, I'd be curious, how do you think of Exos as being either different or better than, like, Tony Ulwick has the desired outcome statements? Just trying to understand sort of the value prop there with the Exos.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't around for the start of Exos, or like kind of how they got translated from Microsoft over to Zillow. So I don't know the whole background, but I do know that we tend to step in a few traps. Like we tend to, it's really hard to get away from the product when we're just talking about the jobs to be done and not the desired outcomes. And so we're talking about someone filling out a rental application. It's really hard to not talk about that physical application that is this gate to getting in. And so I think that's one of the things that we have a hard time getting away from, and getting our partners, our product partners and design partners away from those solutions that we know well, and getting into like what are they actually trying to achieve, and how can we really expand our thinking there. And so it might limit the thinking a little bit too, right? If we're still focused on the job and we haven't gotten to that outcome, we could be narrowing our thinking as well.
You got to send them through our course. We will Elaine and I will correct that bad behavior, Vito, because we spend a lot of time getting away from technology.
Yes, that's a hard one.
And you said they begin with, so they do have a kind of a format. I think one of the important things about jobs to be done in general is consistency of data, right? And you're not just making these exos up. They do have kind of a rhythm and a format that people are expecting them to be in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the important things that you look at, Ron.
And Jonathan, in his comment below, kind of talks a little bit about that formatting as well.
Right.
I don't know if that's,
Yeah, the help me thing, that becomes then an imperative, because who are they talking to, right? They're talking to you, Trulia, and they're pounding their fist and they're saying, help me, right? It's an imperative at that point in time. It's help me do this, right? So there's this invisible person that they're talking to that they're saying, help me to, yeah.
Yeah,
Jonathan, you want to talk about what you did?
Yeah, so the reason we wrote it this way was because our client had some training and jobs to be done, but really hadn't executed on it yet. And they were trying to standardize. So they wanted to, they're like, this is how we're going to write it. Don't write it any other way. You're going to confuse people on our team. What was interesting, I think, because we use the job stories as the backdrop for ideation. So we'll take that in and do ideation. It does become an imperative when you have a team of people within that organization that needs to solve the problem.
Right.
It kind of put it on them. We did, at least in the sessions that we did, we created personas as part of the project, and we got them in that headspace of who is me. So if it's this imperative on this person on the other end to solve that problem, they have to have a deep understanding of who me is. So we did weave that into it to make sure that what they're doing kind of aligns back to it.
Agreed.
It was a little bit different. It was a little bit challenging to put it all together that way, but it was a relatively specific, kind of set of people that we had to design for.
But the field evolves, and Jonathan, you're helping evolve it. I've worked with imperative. That's why I use the term, because when I worked at LexisNexis, Vito, with Margot, we used imperatives statements without knowing much about jobs to be done. And they all began with either help me or I want or give me. And I found, Jonathan, that helps. It helps give a little bit of empathy, because like, help me, wait, somebody's talking. Like if somebody reads that, they're like, wait, who's the me, and why are they demanding this of me? So there's something a little bit more, it grabs you a little bit more when you have that help me or I want or give me. That's what I found, Jonathan.
Yeah. And in this case too, it was for kind of a medical type application. So once you really know the problems that people were having, that helped me really kind of brought people in.
Cool. Right. Yeah. Sucks you in. Again, that's ultimately, you got to bring other people into your research, right? Okay. I think we're going back to Mike. Is that right, Elaine?
I think we got to this one, right?
Oh, did we?
Or is there something else?
Yeah, it might be the one below that.
I think we did. Okay, let's go to Andrew then. Hey, Andrew.
Hey.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, so my question is, I really like the importance versus satisfaction. I think it's a great mental framework for product development in general. But one thing I have always struggled with is how do we determine the threshold? Like especially because I'm in PM role, and when I present to executives, I'm going to say, hey, this is really important, and we got to go in this direction.
Yeah.
But the question is always, how do you know this is actually unsatisfied, right? What is the threshold? So
what do you think, Vito?
I have a take. It's a hard question. If you don't do this regularly and don't have kind of benchmarks established, we always have to rely on the relative importance, relative satisfaction. And so for me, getting more, whatever it is, if it's desired outcomes or if it's jobs that you're surveying people on, getting more of them so you can see that relative importance, or even putting something in there where you know how important or not important it is. Like even for like the Kano method, we stuck in just like this very basic thing, and we're like, oh, that's what a must-have feature looks like. We know that's a must-have feature, and that's what it looks like when we look at these satisfaction coefficients.
Yeah.
And so that could help too if you have something that's known that you could throw in as a benchmark. Otherwise, we just rely on like relative to others. And that chart that I showed established some best practices, like anything over a 10 or anything over a 10 is an underserved need or job or whatever the thing you're measuring, right? So that's how I think about it, is just relative to other things is kind of the best benchmark for me.
Yeah, that's actually pretty smart. So another related question is that I think importance and satisfaction is relative to the persona. Like, for example, actually recently I've been searching for a new home, and I'm a dad, so I care a lot about school rating. And I noticed in your matrix, actually school rating was ranked low, right? So it's kind of relative in that respect too.
Yeah, and theoretically, Andrew, then the definition of a segment. So the definition of a market are a group of people trying to get the same job done. The definition of a segment are people who prioritize the outcomes differently. So you would prioritize the outcomes differently than somebody else. So you would belong to a different segment of people in that market. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Now I recall some of the ODI stuff. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But you know, I did a show with our friend Scott Burleson. So Scott wrote a book called The Statue in the Stone, which is my favorite book on jobs to be done. And we've had him on the show here before, but he and I did a talk. And he noticed on one of my charts that I used the word ease instead of satisfaction, Andrew, that I was doing importance versus ease. And he pointed out that there's a lot of people who aren't satisfied with satisfaction as the label for that dimension. So I actually switched to ease. And the question is, how easy can you get this done? Low ease is difficult then, right? So the chart is the same, but it doesn't say, it says importance along the horizontal axis, and the vertical axis is ease of getting it done. So I actually switched it a little bit. My theory is that it's a little easier for people to compartmentalize that. How easy is that to get done? And it's also, I think, imaginable that on a scale of 1 to 10, you can say how easy it is to get done, right?
Right.
I saw Vito, you just gave a little wince there. What do you think about that?
I like that. No, that was me thinking. That's my thinking face. No, I like that, because I was thinking about like what are all the other dimensions that they lump in there when you're talking about satisfaction.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Now they're attributing like brand details and stuff to the thing that they're using.
All
right.
kinds of things. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
They're like, that tool is really great, but I hate that brand, but it does the job well, and I don't know how satisfied I am.
Right. So I'm 5. I'm satisfied 5. Right. And then the next one, they do the same thing and they say 5. You know, you're like, you're getting no data there, right? You know? Yeah. Well, I changed the ease. I don't know if it's going to throw everything off though. That's the thing. The last survey that I did, I actually changed it to ease. So I've done it before. I don't know if it then throws off your prioritization matrix or anything, but I'm wondering if anybody else has tried that, let us know. And we'd love to hear your story too. Do we have any more questions, Elaine?
There are no more questions right now, but if anybody has one, this is your chance. Go ahead and post it or raise your hand, let us know. I have a question though that I'm kind of curious about, and that is, as a researcher, or I believe you have a research background. Yes, you know, what was it about jobs to be done that appealed to you?
The user-centeredness about it, and the fact that I would say one of the biggest struggles with being a UX researcher, and I guess kind of like a UX practitioner or user-centered designer, is the fact that you're always competing with like business priorities and user priorities, and you're trying to like you're trying not to get trapped in a lot of the current thinking. And so a lot of people come with, hey, we need to make this improvement to this thing because of that. And I think what they're missing is kind of a deeper understanding of the user and whether or not there's a better solution out there. Jim, I don't remember if you remember Adam Torres at Citrix talked about the local maxim. And that was really compelling too. Like, hey, we can really optimize this thing, but the more we optimize this thing and focus on this feature and focus on the functionality and what we're doing, we might be missing the bigger opportunity or the bigger hill behind it. So all of that stuff, that was, I think at Citrix, there was a lot of just that type of learning where it was like, I learned by the book. And then I started to learn all these new things that were happening outside of kind of the traditional UX research approach to things and UX research methodologies. And so that got me thinking more about like, okay, now how do I lean on other ways to continue to drive this user-centered thinking? And this was a big one that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And I mean, I can still see a lot of the thinking there with the Exos and the work you did on Truly. Obviously, that's why I invited you to contribute the case study. And it has a nice outcome too, that story, because you actually can show screens and things. But that just extending that thinking, I think is the important thing. I see jobs to be done as a way of thinking really about it. It's a shift in thinking. And one of the things we do at the end of the course too, is I give like short little things that you can do, because there's this big process, right? And people get daunted, Vito, by the survey and there's charts and I'm not a statistician and all these things. Like, just next time you're in a conversation with your colleagues and they start getting wrapped up in themselves in terms of feature, just stop and say, what's the job to be done here, right? It can just be a heuristic to help shift the conversation, right? At a minimum, jobs to be done shifts the conversation away from yourself and towards the person you're trying to serve, right?
Yep. I am known to be the person in the middle of the meeting to say, what problem are we solving?
Right.
And then sometimes a lengthy pause. But I think even better is what is the outcome we are trying to affect, or what is the job we are helping them try to do, and start to use more of that language to really reinforce that.
And has that helped or hurt your career by being that person? What do you think?
I think it helped.
Are you the thorn in people's sides, or are you like, oh yeah, Vito's right?
There's some finesse that goes along with it.
Yeah.
To be the like, oh yes, I do agree with that. But yeah, it's we have a lot of structures. We have like product briefs and research briefs and opportunity briefs, and all of them have the section of what is the problem, the customer problem we're going to solve. And we even have little text like formulate this in terms of experience outcomes, or we have this other structure called mission critical moments. And so we give people that hint to be like, think about it in terms of the customer, what matters to them, what outcomes they're trying to achieve.
Right. But there's a problem with the word problem, is because you could have a section that says problem, and then people say, yeah, people can't log in on their mobile devices when they don't have reception or something like that. And they could describe a problem that way. So it's a very specific way of describing the problem that you need to lead people to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, I don't know, we only have 5 minutes left. I don't know if you want to get into like, are there times when you really are just solving a problem? You need to get over some hump, right?
I agree.
Because there are times when we do product development that's not in service of a user need.
Agree.
It is something that we'd have to do on the back end to allow the service and all that. And so there might be a time when, hey, it's a quick fix. We're talking about a problem versus maybe we're talking about an opportunity.
Right.
Or something like that.
A human-centered opportunity problem versus we just have a problem with our offering and we need to go out there and fix it. And you know what? If there's a doorknob that's broken, if I look over here at the door and the doorknob's broken, I don't need to do a survey of 100 people to know that the doorknob's broken. I just look at it and I say, fix the doorknob, right? So you don't need to do this all the time, right?
Or you're not looking for a better doorknob, right?
Well, I'm not. No, I just want to fix this one because I got people coming over and I just need this one fixed tonight for my party or whatever, right? So this is a question we get all the time, Elaine. When do you use jobs to be done then? When's a good time to use jobs to be done?
And speaking of that, there's also a question that Anna has that's essentially about the job performer. So if you want to segue when into how do you identify the performer? That's on the last Post-it note.
Hi there. Yeah, I have a question about very practical actually about the analysis of survey data. So we did a lot of qualitative jobs to be done research. So with interviews, that's really nice. And now we finally got to the point we do quantity one with a selection of 3 jobs and 5 most important needs statements from these jobs. we are at 150 responses right now, and I hope to get 100 more. So it's not this million of users a day website. Yeah, but I really wonder, how do you approach it? Because you can filter from the perspective of, okay, let's see this persona or this segment, how important this need statements for them and how unsatisfied they are. I love the point of how easy they can get this job done. Or you can look at from another perspective. So which jobs are really unsatisfied? And then to see perspective of what is the segmentation. So I just really wonder from you guys, which one do you use, or both? So in the analysis part.
I could go quick. I mean, I'm not a trained quantitative researcher, and so I do all of the like, let's go see if this made a difference. Let's go look at it in this way. So I don't have set hypotheses and have a really rigorous approach to doing that. I kind of do the like, what does it look like if we look at satisfaction and split it this way amongst the segments? What happens? And so I do it that way. But Jim, you might have a more
no, I'm in a similar
approach.
situation. I just know enough about quantitative to be able to ask somebody else to do it for me, which we did at Citrix. We had this quant guy that was pretty amazing.
Yep.
And I remember he was doing like statistical zoom. We did the outcome survey and then he zoomed in on it statistically. And I'm still not sure what that means, but he exaggerated the results so that it was like a fisheye zoom of it or something like that. This is way beyond my abilities though to do that.
Okay.
But it's possible. It's possible. I mean, it depends on who you're talking to. I think that's kind of my answer. Is who needs those results and at what point in time as well too.
It's for developing of new proposition for certain B2B segments. So from this
you probably want some power behind that then.
Yeah, you want some power behind it. And I'm really very curious, the ODI approach of segmenting the market according to needs. So basically what you just touched 10 minutes ago.
Right.
So I wonder, if you really want to segment the market, then you have to start with needs and the most important and least satisfied for who it is. But it's a kind of really awkward way to do analysis of quantitative data. So that's why I'm just
I've actually never done that myself. So I can't speak to actually how they do that. Because I've never done the segmentation. I've always just been looking for opportunities to kind of take into.
No, we passed that one. So I'm now really looking at segmentation. And next month I will be able to tell how did it work out.
We might have you on, Anna, to tell your story then next time. But thanks for that thought. And thanks everyone for joining. Vito, it was great seeing you again. I don't know when we'll actually see each other in person, but we should stay in touch. We don't have that Slack channel anymore, do we? Is that Slack channel still open?
Oh, I think it's still there. No one uses it.
Still there. I was going to reach out to you and I realized I don't have it in my Slack thing, so I couldn't Slack you. So we emailed, but next time we'll get together in person. It was really great talking to you. And thanks for sharing all the details. I'm sure folks here learned a lot from that. So appreciate that, Vito.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, thanks for having me. And thanks for all the great questions, everyone. Yeah,
really good questions and a great conversation. I think with that, Elaine, unless I forgot anything, we'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back on October 25th. I just posted the link to register. So if you want to get the Zoom information on your calendar now, go ahead and click on that and get signed up for next month so you have it readily available. And keep an eye on our Twitter feed and our email newsletter for regular updates. We will be announcing new dates for the Job Maps course that we offer probably in early December. Is that right,
Something
Jim?
like that. Yeah, we haven't said it yet, but that sounds good. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone.
And Vito's going to go add emotion to his hydration format. So Vito's got his on the post-it. He's got